Howdy, my dudes. I've been getting a lot of requests from you all to help fix with your builds, and I've been getting to them as much and as fast as I can, but right now I'm going to try to do something a little bit different. I'm going to try and help as many people as I can, potentially all of you, with giving some build concepts that will help any build that you have. And really, it'll turn anything that you have into a monster as long as you put these concepts in place. Then it'll help you get end game viable, it'll build your passive tree, help with your gearing, and hopefully I can help you with a little more advanced topics like scaling your damage and survivability exponentially and how to use and choose the proper skill gems and support gems, of course. I got timestamps in the video if you're already comfortable with some topics, and hopefully you can skip around to something that will actually help you get a little bit stronger on some points that you weren't as comfortable on. So now without further ado, let's get started. So the first and most important thing you're going to want to do when you're choosing a build is find something that you actually enjoy playing. You're going to want to know what main skills you actually like using for potentially hundreds of hours, and you're going to want to know what kind of defenses you like using to keep yourself alive. For me, it was pretty easy. I saw Tempest Flurry and I saw Ice Strike, and I really liked those skills. Then I knew already that I really liked Evasion, I liked Energy Shield, and so for me, it kind of made it pretty obvious. Invoker seemed amazing. It had ways to scale the offenses from the elemental skills super well. It's really rewarded big energy shield and evasion combos, and then it also had ways to supercharge it with things like Slender My Enemies. Then I saw the supplementary skills around it, like how Charge Staff just works so well with Ice Strike and Charge and Tempest Flurry. And then I also found other things like the Bell, which I wasn't sold on initially, but in practice I absolutely fell in love with it. Like, you don't need to have the perfect build in mind in order to make something really special. You just need to enjoy it and keep with it and find ways to make it better. My build straight up sucked for the entire first half of the campaign. I was dying constantly. But once I started to put things together, it quickly became amazing. Like, I never expected this for it to be a meta build, but here I am literally deleting arbiters in seconds. So now you'll need to stay alive. So one thing you need to know about PoE is that it rewards hyper-focusing into a single or maybe two types of stats. And if you wanted life, evasion, energy shield, armor, physical, elemental, everything, you'd be extremely weak because there's no way to effectively scale them all. You'd just be spread too thin. Hyper-focusing in one or two will allow you to scale those base numbers from your gear to the absolute moon, way higher than you could ever scale all of them. So once you have that figured out and you've picked a basic concept for your character, we're going to make sure that it doesn't die upon first contact with the enemies. And so to do that, you're going to want to set up your skills to keep you alive. So since I'm elemental damage, there's a lot of ways that I'd want to inflict elemental ailments. Elemental ailments are things like electrocute here, and with cold damage, freeze. And then there's obviously the other ones like shock, ignite, and chill, but those ones aren't as important for keeping you alive as freeze and electrocute are. They are incredible defensive layers. And then when you have all that in place, you're going to want to think, if I'm going pure energy shield, I have no evasion. How else am I going to be able to keep things off of me? Because if I get swarmed, it doesn't matter how much energy shield I have. If I keep getting hit, I'm going to die. So then something like minions comes into place. And while minions aren't like evasion per se, the fact that you might have 3 minions out means potentially 3 hits that would have came towards you went for the minions instead, so that's kind of like having 75% evasion. These are all just little bits of layers that you can really think about to give you added survivability, and all of it will be needed. And like on top of that, since I again am pure energy shield, you might want something like Grim Feast in there to double overcap your energy shield, or Shock Siphon, so that when you do get low and you do get swarmed, something bad does happen, you don't just pop. There's another thing though, it's not just your skills that are keeping you alive, it's the stats on your gear. You're going to want to look to cap all your resistances for sure. Like, this is extremely important. I'm not even fully capped on cold, and unfortunately, the way to do that is either to lose power with my rings or to get a better ingenuity. So these are things I need to think about and I need to improve on. In PoE 1, you could flip some resistances around on gear and it'd be easier so I could swap lightning and cold, but that's just not an option here. So unfortunately, DPS means nothing if you're dead, and PoE 1 or PoE will absolutely murk your character if you don't take care of this. So figure out what, if any, required uniques you have for your build first. For me, it's the pillar and the gloves. And then you'll know exactly what kind of gear you have to work with to fix all these other holes. So luckily I have both rings, an amulet, boots, chest and helmet, and if I didn't have this belt, I'd also have a normal rare belt. And that would help find all these gaps. And these are a lot of items to choose from. So luckily, this allows you to have a little bit of leeway, and so I don't just need to focus on resistances, I also get things that buff my build in other ways. But before getting to that, I want to make a note here that because we can't swap things around, it's kind of hard to mess with resistances. If you have something that works and you're wanting to upgrade your gear, before you get it all sorted, do not get rid of your old gear, because then you might accidentally brick yourself and you're going to have a bad time. I know this from experience. It's happened to everybody. So, luckily, like I said, I have a bunch of open rares here. So, I'm going to lead this into part 3, knowing what gear is good for you. And so, obviously, stat stacking. These both highly reward stat stacking. And the bonuses they give you feed your elemental skills like a prize pick. Like, there's an issue though, and it's that you can't just go all attributes because then you'll be a glass cannon, and glass cannons get shattered. So, seeing how both items work though, is that they scale off base damages. So, like this here, 1 to 12 lightning damage gives you the base damage, and the increased weapon damage per 5 strength scales the base. They work really well together. However, there's other things here like the cold damage on attacks. This 17 to 30 cold damage to attacks, when you add an extra 1000% weapon damage from this increased weapon damage per 5 strength, well, that 30 cold quickly turns into 600 maximum cold damage. And that is like adding a big extra weapon onto your build just for having a little bit of added damage onto your build here. It's nuts, but that is just damage. Back to the point I made about focusing on your defenses, you don't really want to overcomplicate gearing either. So, one thing that I find extremely helpful for gearing is finding ways to take away bits of gear. Chaos Inoculation, perfect example of that. Love it. It guides you into exactly what you need to build. So, in that case, my life becomes 1. Now, I no longer need any life on my gear at all. It's useless. And that allows me to hyper-focus into energy shield evasion. And then on top of that, it makes my chaos resistance not matter because I'm immune to it. So now I don't need to look for chaos resistance. Just the rest of the resistances. It makes it so much easier for gearing. And so now with all that, it's kind of nuts because it allows you to scale things like such a high energy shield that you would never be able to get with a life scaling. And so back to the point of not needing to get life and not needing armor and all that, hyper focusing allows you to scale this to an absolutely ridiculous margin. And so Archmage would be feeling the exact same way. They would take all these same concepts, except for you know you need maximum mana in your build, so every single piece of gear you'd have would have maximum mana on it. And this is just same thing for every other kind of build. You keep hammering it and hammering your strengths and shoring up those weaknesses, and you are going to make a truly amazing character. And now, so for the suffixes, right now, all I know, suffixes are where you get your attributes and resistances. So your suffixes are the most important things on all your gear for your amulet, rings, and belt for sure. Belt, if I didn't have the ingenuity, it would be all resistances and some attributes. Now, because CI, the boots, the chest, and the helmet are a little bit more difficult to find because you will be looking for the absolutely perfect piece. That means 3 things that boost your defenses, so pumping the energy shield. I got 3 mods on here, but it looks like 2 because the third mod is again energy shield and energy shield. And then I also got the suffixes that are resistances and attributes. They are kind of difficult to find and they will be expensive if you find the perfect piece, but if you know what you're looking for, you can find deals and you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be really good. Following this will basically make you super tanky and do a ridiculous amount of damage, even if you just have mid-rolled gear. Find what you need. Maybe you don't have the perfect resistances on here or the attributes on here, but you can mix and match and find something that works. So these concepts hold true for every build in the game. And if you look at your current gear and you see a set piece that isn't doing the most it can for you, if it's missing a suffix when the suffixes are the most important, or missing a prefix when you absolutely need the defenses, then you already know that piece is basically living on borrowed time and is going to need to be replaced. Eventually. Not right away, but eventually. And so just know that every minor increase and upgrade to your gear scales harder than the little bit before. The higher you get, the more effective and more efficient it is. It's exponential. And now this leads us into our fourth point, the passive tree. This one gets a little bit trickier because there's so much to choose from. It's big, it's intimidating, it's scary, and you're absolutely going to want to find your new best friend path of building. So for your passive tree, you're going to see it's massive, obviously, but well, you're going to want to set up a few things, and you're going to want to do it in a specific order. It's right now not perfectly set up, but a few things that you need to know is you just kind of check these boxes under configuration to set you up properly, and set your boss type to Uber Pinnacle. Once you put that in, you don't need to worry about these custom modifiers yet. I've put that in because of things that POE doesn't quite have set up yet, but they will be put in eventually. So, anyways, I will get back to the tree here because this is the most important bit. I had already chosen Invoker, and so that I know about the defenses. You got to scale that. I've already picked the defenses. I know I'm going elemental damage, and Sunder my enemies is insane, so it gives crit. I'm not going to get a lot of crit from my equipment, but I am very naturally pathing it throughout the entire tree. So following the strengths of what I know I need. But yeah, you come out here and you see how every single node I have is either giving me more energy shield, more attributes, a little bit of utility, crit, and just defenses in general, or the absolute build changing keystones. There's nothing else that matters. I'm not coming out here. I'm not getting some stun threshold in case I've been stunned recently. I'm not caring about any of these. They're dead stats. You can fix any gap in your build through your little bits of gear with your jewels here. Like here, gaining more maximum energy shield or as stun threshold. That's incredible. You keep focusing on the skills in your tree that will actually transform your build and shore up the gaps, and you'll have nothing to worry about. So just holding that kind of thought process in mind, after POB came out, this was already my tree. And after spending literally multiple hours tinkering, just because I had that thought process of how to build the tree, after tinkering around, there was almost nothing to change to make it better. It was still almost perfectly optimized. And that's just should not happen. But yeah, I applied this concept to any build, and it will work out. You will. Well, with all that, we're going to have to put it all together. And to do that, we need to look at skill gems. Things that you need to know about are what do your skills actually do. So what is doing your damage? What is just utility support? What are you using to buff? Is there things for single target? Is there things for clear? And so I know a lot of people, they like to brag about, oh, my Tempest Flurry does 1,000,000 damage per second. Oh, look at how amazing it is. Tempest Flurry does not matter. If you look at all these gems here, you can see all these great numbers, but there's one that I don't have on here, is Rage. You can jack up your Tempest Flurry as high as you want to, it does not matter. You drop all that, it doesn't really matter that much, but your overall DPS hasn't changed, but you just put some Rage on, and you skyrocket. And then, I know POB right now isn't doing the best job of showing it, but you put on Overcharge, it will also skyrocket it. This number is probably higher because Overcharge. Putting things on like Shock Magnitude will give a bigger, more multiplier to the things that matter. It will help with things like your heralds going off, and it'll help with the bell taking out the bosses. You don't need to worry about the silly utility skills doing damage, you just need to make sure the utility skills feel really well comfortable to use. That's why sticking things like Concentrated Effect, Mini Impact, Elemental Focus will only nerf your build if you put it on to something like Tempest Flurry. If you have a utility skill in your build, don't make it your damage skill, unless it's some sort of weird tech that actually works out. Same thing like Charge Staff. You don't need to use Charge Staff for damage, you use it for utility. So I toss things like Culling Strike on there so that it takes the boss out at like 5% health. I take out or put on Persistence so it lasts a little longer and feels more comfortable to use. And I use Electrocute Neural Overload to buff the shocks that come from Tempest Flurry and to give another ailment to the bell, which is nuts. Things like the bell, this actually matters for damage because that beautiful 30% more damage per elemental ailment afflicting the bell. That's why I have all these lovely other skills on here, and after playing around with this for a very long time, obviously Mini Impact is amazing, but you're not going to be able to use this all the time if your build does not have Mini Impact or minions to use Mini Impact with. But to show you how much you lose, it's really ridiculous. You lose 9 million damage a second by not having that big multiplier on. If you're going to lose that, if you're going to lose this, you want to know which one's potentially the best one to replace it with. You wouldn't think Potential's as amazing as it is, but Potential's ridiculous. It's better than Close Combat, a 25% more multiplier. That's crazy. So you'd think something like Immolate would be better than Potential because it's 30% more. But no, Potential is actually better than Immolate. What other things could we possibly use if we can't use all these wonderful skills? And this is with any skill. You got to find the best use for all these skill gems because unfortunately they're very limited. You might think Heavy Swing because 35% more, but it's only melee physical, and with this build we have so little physical damage, putting this in slots it and does absolutely nothing. Elemental Focus gives you insane damage. It would be wonderful to slot this in, but the problem with Elemental Focus is that it has a huge downside and it does not allow you to inflict elemental ailments. And this build we've already talked about has incredible reliance and takes advantage of elemental ailments. That means when you drop this bell, you're not going to be able to freeze the boss with the bell. You're not going to be able to electrocute it either. If you're using it like something in Simulacrum, you really rely on that for survivability as well. And so Elemental Focus, while it's a huge damage increase, could be a massive drawback for your build if you do not use it properly. Something like Rage Forge could be great if you generate enough rage, but as we saw, when we take rage off, it's a monstrous damage reduction. Lightning Infusion sounds like it'd be great because we do so much lightning damage and we get 25% of damage as more lightning damage, but the 50% less fire and cold means we actually lose damage when we use Lightning Infusion. Hourglass is a little tricky. It says it loses damage, but as long as you're able to one bell an enemy, this is wonderful. It's just as good as Minion Pack, but if you're not able to one bell, it gets really awkward really fast. Lightning Penetration, because we crit and ignore elemental resistances on crit, is barely any damage reduction or increase, and Execute only works when the boss is already really low. Low life, I think, is 40% and less. And if you have something like Culling Strike on your charge staff, that means you're only getting 35%. So it's 35% of 40, you're getting like a 12% more damage increase. So in this instance, your choice here would be Elemental Focus or Immolate, or potentially Hourglass is the best ones to choose for the build. I know this looks scary, so if you're afraid of those damage numbers, I would probably put Immolate on, fully knowing Elemental Focus will say higher numbers, but Immolate will not have the drawbacks. So in this case here, I do have minions so I can use it. Then you also make sure that your AoE clear abilities are doing what they need for AoE clear and not wasting time and skills where they don't need to be. I want you to keep this in mind when you're doing any kind of build. So if you're doing a cast on minion death build, you wouldn't be putting all the damage skills in Fireball. No, those damage skills go for the comets when you're doing comets per second. A couple of things you may want to know about for checking out your POB. Your damage numbers may not be the same as mine because I have gone around their issues. I've added 40% more elemental damage to account for Avatar because Avatar does not work on here. I've added critical hits, ignore enemy, monster, elemental resistances for my Sundermy enemies because that is not included on there. And I've included the energy shield gain for my Heroic Tragedy Jewel because that is also not included on there. I have added the benefit of Charge Infusion, and if you do not think Charge Infusion is absolutely incredible and a must-have skill, watch this. When I take off the 20% more critical hit chance, I go from 32 million DPS to 27. It's ridiculously good. And you can lose that 20 for 12% more skill speed. It kind of doesn't tell the whole picture with that because you're also losing the wonderful mobility you get from moving faster and proccing the bell a little faster, but as you can tell, that 20% more critical hit chance is an insane damage number and increase that you will not want to lose out on. Now, I hope this has helped a little bit. I know it's a little bit off topic here and there, but I definitely wanted to bring up the points that actually matter. Do not fall for the tricks. I want you to absolutely know what kind of build you're going to enjoy. I want you to stay on topic with that. I want you to focus on getting one or two defenses to actually scale, cap your resistances, keep you alive. Once you're able to get your defenses up, then you scale your damage. After you get your damage up, then you can look at upgrading piecemeal by piecemeal, but none of it will matter unless you don't have build synergy with your skills and with your supports. So now I really hope this helps. I really, really hope this helps. And if not, let me know and I'll try to do better next time. Alrighty, thanks my dudes. See you later.